I mean, what do you make of this interview? You've watched it in full, I think.
Yeah, I watched it in full at 1 a.m. I think mostly Tucker Carlson would be pretty disappointed because he was so rambling, so unimpressive, so full of the most extraordinary lies that Poland collaborated with Hitler, and that's why World War II began.
That's an extraordinary claim just on its own.
Absolutely extraordinary. But having lived in Russia, I know that 99% of Russians do not know that Stalin and Hitler had a pact for 2 years, that they divided up Poland. They don't even know about this. So this whole reinterpretation of history, and it just continues through his whole interpretation of this Ukrainian invasion, that the US started it. And then he goes on about this thing about denazification. And he cites that Ukrainians collaborated with the Germans. This is true, and actually, in fact, in the West, we perceive it as being extremely brave. They wanted to get rid of communism. They'd had this awful famine in the 30s where millions of Ukrainians had died. And he fails to mention that also 1 million Russians collaborated with the Germans. They did it not because they espoused the Nazi cause, but because they wanted to get rid of... Well, no, they wanted to get rid of communism. And so they would do anything to get rid of communism.
I mean, it's interesting, you understand the language. And you know the man, actually, as well, because...
Well, I don't know him personally. I've been in a room with him.
Oh, well, I thought you were part of the inner circle at one point.
Well, my ex-partner was definitely, very close to him, and he told me a lot about him. And actually, psychologically, it was very interesting, this interview, because you can see that Putin is extremely angry. He's on the verge of a sort of outbreak. And some of it, you can't hear much of the Russian because they've dubbed right over it, but he gets very angry and he's very sarcastic and sneering, which doesn't...
Well, I was surprised at that because I thought, in a sense, that, as you say, Tucker Carlson, you think he'll be disappointed with this. I thought Tucker was wanting to almost take this home and say, look, here's a man we can do business with if Trump was in power. That was the whole point of this interview, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's fascinating. Looking at Tucker's face, you do think he's disappointed because what is extraordinary, but it is in the Soviet tradition that Putin has absolutely no concept of public relations, how to present himself. I guess it works with his domestic audience, but he rambles on for almost 40 minutes at the beginning about the most crazy, sort of obscure reinterpretation of Russian history. And that is not going to convince an American audience, is it? They're going to be bored within 2 minutes.
Well, I would have thought so too, and it's a very long interview, isn't it? But what I also thought is that Putin knows his own face, doesn't he? We couldn't tell the nuance of what he was saying. Probably you could. But there are many times when he smiles and twinkles his eye and looks as nonchalant. But was he really like that?
Actually, at those moments, I think he's being extremely sneering and very patronising and like, you know, you're so stupid, we're so clever. You can't gauge me, we're so powerful. I mean, it's childish. It's, you know, sort of kindergarten politics. And actually, I think he looks very out of control and actually quite nervous in a way.
But you see, there's an arrogance there, isn't there? Which is what concerns the West, really, because every political leader is going to be looking at this to get that bit of insight into, and all the analysts will be working on it. And that arrogance is going to worry them, surely, I would have thought. I
think it is, but it's so deranged, and there seem to be lots of... There aren't that many, actually. There were far fewer threats than I thought there would be. And at the moment, we're not proposing that American soldiers go and fight in Ukraine, are we? That was the only sort of direct threat. And mostly you feel like it's a very, very personal thing for him. At one point, even Tucker Carlson says, you know, you're bitter, aren't you? And he says, I'm not bitter. And clearly he is. It's a huge personal insult to him.
And he also made out, didn't he, that the Western leaders are to a penny. They change all the time. You can't do business with them because there's a different one every time, which, frankly, he might have a point on. But he doesn't get that actually we see it from a completely different perspective in that he has been president for a long time and is the only candidate for presidency, and we see that as a bad thing. He sees it as a good thing.
Exactly, and actually I felt Tucker Carlson was sort of saying, sarcastically, you know, you've been president for a very long time. But mostly, I would say it was a fail for Putin and a fail for Tucker Carlson.
Yes. And not very impressive for anyone.
No.
Which is interesting. I mean, do you... In terms of the American side of this, what do you think has been achieved for Trump? Because it's almost... as I say, it almost seems to have been this weird situation we have now where the right in America, whereas it's always, you know, as we said before, red's under the bed, not that many decades ago.
The right has swung right round to the left,
round, so it's almost like they're not supporting Putin, but, you know, they want to work with them.
In the same way that Hitler and Stalin were allies, you know, crazy allies who'd come full circle. It's the same now. I think what that probably they'll say is the achievement was that, oh, hey, Tucker Carlson got the interview and the BBC didn't, and, you know, all these other, CNN didn't get it, and so...
But if they had, they would have put far more challenging questions to Putin.
Yes, although I was quite surprised. He was asking about the American journalists, but that came right at the very end. And then... yeah, Putin, he just doesn't answer, and he just is so shifty and saying he's not a spy, and then he is a spy, and sort of veiled things there, too, that we're going to keep him, we're not going to let him go.
I mean, to give Tucker some due in all of this, is it a terrifying thing to do?
For Tucker?
To go and interview... Because I always sort of think, and it might be totally wrong, but you sort of think, well, if I say the wrong thing here, am I going to be around in 12 months' time? I don't know if...
I think it was... No, I don't think it's dangerous like that. I think it was Putin feels he's so in control of the situation that he'll be happy with it. It's also very symptomatic of that sort of also Soviet elite that they have no sense of self-awareness at all because they're so permanently in power. They have no... It's just a little echo chamber around them. They don't believe...
There's no humility there at all.
Not at all. And when he talks about Christianity, I mean, it's absolutely deranged. He lives the most completely un-Christian life. He's living in secret with his lover, he's divorced, he's totally cynical. I don't even know he was baptised. But he somehow, I think he believes it maybe, and his public fall for it.
You said earlier, you know, you've been in the same room as him. What is his effect on that room? Does he have charisma?
No, he's very small, like often these people are. He's obviously very insecure. When I saw him, he came in with this massive phalanx of bodyguards. He struts. I mean, he's very predictable, and it's very funny and amusing to a Western audience, but I think Russians are more impressed by it.
And does the public love him?
Yes.
They do?
Honestly, they do. And I was trying to read what, you know, the perception of Russians in what they're feeling about this interview, but not much has really come out yet. Yes, they absolutely... really, really do support him. I've fallen out with friends because intelligent people who...
Well, that's
but
what
even with, I was going to say, even with the body count going up,
it doesn't matter. They think, and what I sort of got to the bottom of their attitude. I mean, friends who sophisticated, you know, extremely educated, intelligent friends who travel to the West, still travel to the West a lot. They say their attitude is, Russia's our country and we will support her, and it doesn't really matter what she does. And this absolute paranoia. So in the Soviet Union, the propaganda was we're better than the West, so therefore we love the Soviet Union. Now it's a completely different propaganda. It's the West hates us, the West hates us. And this they have fully embraced, and they say we will just protect our country. You hate us, you're out to destroy. So he did talk about this in the interview, how the West is out to destroy Russia. And Tucker Carlson says, well, we're not out to destroy China, and they're way more powerful than you.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. He does say some quite sharp things.
And Putin responded?
Putin, he makes some complicated, weird psychological... Yeah, it's not... Yeah, it's never... The answers are never to the point. Ever.
No. Well,
it seems so sad because you, with your amazing name, by the way, you know, the Russian people are in many ways such lovely people.
Unbelievable.
And we have a great bond. We're sort of similar. And yet, Stephen and I were talking a year ago now, probably plus, to a Ukrainian lady in Kiev who has family inside Russia.
They all do. That's the crazy thing.
We're ringing them, we're talking to them, and they see it from a completely different point of view.
Yeah.
We say Russia has attacked us, and we're fighting for our lives, and that their own family on the other side of the border is saying, no, no, that's not true.
No, we're defending ourselves. So he talks about that, we are defending ourselves. But they've never incurred inside their border. It's absolutely insane. But I think it all stems back from, at the end of the Soviet Union, they didn't do like in Germany with the Nuremberg trials. They had no public... you know, recompensing for these terrible sins of the Soviet Union. He talks a lot about how Hitler was such a dreadful person. He doesn't once refer to Stalin, who killed millions and millions of his own people. And his whole history thing is a completely sort of weird mishmash of imperialist and Soviet, who, you know, they fought a revolution against each other, and a civil war, but because they never went through this...
They never questioned it.
They haven't come to terms with it, and so the general public are completely just in such a muddle.
Yeah, OK. Look, it's really interesting to talk to you this morning.